Oh, look. I think it's showtime, everybody. This is called Bring It In. It's TrueHoop's Quarantine from Home show, and we're discussing whether or not Dana Smith, Elemental Senior Challenge writer, is currently breaking a record for having been the most common repeat guest on Bring It In. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you.
And she's missing. Dana lives in a world where a really exciting thing is who's running the conference?
The National Academy of Sciences and Medicine and Engineering. I'm not sure what their official name is, but the National Academy is hosting a big workshop on airborne spread today and tomorrow. It's still free to register on Eventbrite. Everyone can join.
She's missing it right now to join us, and in her role, this is a very big thing to miss. So thank you. We're honored that you're here for us.
My pleasure.
But before we get to Dana with coronavirus updates, it is Wednesday, which means it's TrueHoop special correspondent Adina Jones live from the shoe room.
Yes.
How are you, Dina?
I'm great. Thanks, guys. Yes, live from the shoe room that I haven't left since March, right? I've literally been here today. Hoodie Dina, 3 to the dome. Not feeling too well, but I'm here for you guys, and I'm sure I'll feel better after this. So I'm gonna share my screen. I feel like I say that every time, and it's like a cliche, but I say it, so I say it. So I'm gonna start off with a little happy in the world because it's gonna get rough. It's gonna get real rough real quick. Here we go. Shout out to the homie Randy. Like, I had seen this on Twitter, but Randy was like, make sure you see it, include it on Wednesdays. I got you. Kindergartners, guys, kindergartners in China. We are, we're in for one. We're in for one. I don't think I could have done that or had that hand-eye coordination at kindergarten age, whatever age kindergarten is. What age is that? You guys have kids. I don't know.
5, 6.
Okay, thanks. 5, 6. Next up, you guys, we've talked since, but we had not only Kobe Bryant's birthday, but we also had Mamba Day, which is 8/23 and 8/24. Diana Taurasi honored him by wearing his number and name, original number, in the bubble, and she also scored a season high 34 points by wearing it. So it's like, you wear the GOAT's number, you gotta come through and you gotta come correct. And I was really happy to see a lot of other WNBA players, how they paid tribute to Kobe. This is the Minnesota Lynx and Atlanta Dream bus, and it's just like Kobe jersey after Kobe jersey after Kobe jersey. And like, I don't know what it is about seeing players wear jerseys off the court. It kind of just reminds me of high school. You know, we used to, like, game day, you'd walk around with your jersey on, like, yeah, I got a game. And it feels like that. So it was really warming. I love some Wubble beef. I think I said that before on the show. It's like, where else are you gonna, hit somebody with a hard offensive charge and then have to see them in the lobby right afterwards? And last time I was here, Diana Taurasi was like, told one of the refs, like, yeah, I'll see you in the lobby. And here, Sue Bird, who's also been a guest of TrueHoop, she talks about the Indiana Fever.
I took it very personally that you did not play in that loss. What's your status and how did you react to those comments?
Yeah, I thought they were kind of funny. I think they forgot they were going to have to see me in the lunch line and have to see me in the elevator.
Like,
so that was kind of...
See me in the lunch line, see me in the elevator. Oh, man. It's
that
like...
is 8th grade right there.
Okay. It was like, throw your pizza tray down and it's on. So I heard there's actually a documentary coming out about the WNBA bubble. So hope there's like some lunch line beef. And I'm also looking for lunch line merchandise. So I could make it myself, but I'm lazy. So I'm asking whoever out there.
So that was kind of...
It was just a little bit.
We saw playoff Pete, pandemic Pete, all these names we heard about Paul George in games 2, 3, and 4. He was in a bit of a slump, and come to find out, game 5, he actually scored 35 points, which was a higher total than the other 3 games. Come to find out, Paul George said he was suffering from, I don't want to say suffering from mental illness, but had a mental breakdown and had anxiety. I mean, he's locked in a bubble away from his family. So I'll let you guys hear what he had to say about his slump and about mental health.
Everything. I underestimated mental health. Honestly, I had anxiety, a little bit of depression, just being locked in here, I just wasn't there. I checked out, and it was, games 2, 3, 4. I wasn't there. I felt like I wasn't there. But, shout out to the people that was in my corner, the people that gave me words. Shout out Laura.
sound was a little iffy on there, but he basically, you know, he had seen the team psychiatrist, said that he had been suffering from anxiety and he was, you know, in a dark place, he says, and that he just wasn't all there. And I feel bad because I probably was one of the people like playoff Pete, pandemic Pete, and talking about his slump, because I think that's what we do in basketball, right? But then for him to come out and say this, I think we forget that this is the most unusual circumstance ever that any human being, let alone a basketball player, can be in. And I think Paul George also said he was having an issue separating basketball on and being off. I mean, your entire life is basketball when you're in that bubble. So when do you relax? When do you not touch a basketball? When do you get back to your normal self? And he was having issues with that. And Coach, I think you had some contact with some guys in the bubble too, right?
I had this whole time, and particularly this morning, a player called me early this morning, and we talked about this. And I graduated degree in psychology, but I'm not a psychologist, certainly not a psychiatrist. But I know that he feels good that he can talk to me about life, not just playoff basketball. And that's when you're talking about on and off. Henry referenced this before. They don't get an off. There's no just play with the kids or do whatever at home, and you need a break. And they're not getting a break. Fishing in that bass-filled lake isn't enough, apparently. And everyone's different. They all have different breaking points. It's great that Paul, to me, the fact that he referenced this publicly is monumentally important for players, from young people to pros, that it doesn't make you less masculine to admit that you need to talk to someone. I'm very proud of Paul.
Yeah, same here. And I hope, you know, other players come out and if they have issues too, and I hope the team psychiatrists or the bubble psychiatrists, there's a huge line outside of it, because like I said, this is unprecedented times for any human being.
Right.
Also wanted to tap into this.
A strong bucket.
Backstory. Montrezl Harrell, he was having a back and forth between Luka Doncic during a game where Luka went off and called him a bitch ass white boy, and you can see in his
Montrezl Harrell. I said in game.
So called him a bitch ass white boy. It turned into a thing, especially in the climate that we're in right now. It's like I think Doc Rivers said everyone's sensitive, and it looked like a racial thing. And you know, if we're not supposed to be yelling at black folk with racial slurs, you know, what are we doing here? Montrez did end up apologizing, and Luka accepted his apology. We didn't hear what that apology was about, nor do we deserve to hear what it's about, right? Like
but it was a good hug, honestly.
Right, right. It was a good hug. We saw it. We didn't need to hear it.
Yeah.
And there are people like, you know, this is equivalent to a racial slur, and I'm gonna just say it out loud. It ain't, because I feel comfortable saying bitch ass white boy on this show, but I don't feel comfortable, and I still say N-word on this show, right?
Because slavery.
Yeah, hashtag slavery, right? So while, yes, it wasn't nice, it's also like not nice to call someone a loser and, you know, and all these other things, but let's please not do that here, and I'm not here for that.
By Montrezl Harrell. I said in game.
Thought this was relevant considering what we've talked about on the show. We had the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks on. So now Black Coaches United, a newly formed alliance, they are pushing for universities to make voting more accessible on election day. So exactly what we talked about, like what are the rest of these arenas doing? And we're not just talking basketball arenas, we're talking football arenas. We got Paul Thompson, that's on who else? John Thompson, Paul Hewitt. They're all on the board, and they're pushing for arenas to be voting centers. Also, they're pushing for November 3rd to be a day off for athletes so that they can go vote. And lastly, also pushing to help student athletes learn how to vote. And Lebron said that he didn't vote until he was 21, even though it's kind of not the same because like he was in the NBA by that time. But I just imagine, I remember going to school away from home and learning how to get an absentee ballot for my place back home is very difficult. And so these Black coaches are doing the same here in hopes that election day can be a more equitable situation for us. Next up is Lebron. Lebron talked about the most recent, I hate that I had to get on here and talk about this. Like I love it, but I hate it that, you know, sometimes I'm like, oh, what am I going to do on Wednesday? Oh, black man got shot. Let's talk about it. Like, it's ridiculous at this point in time. So Jacob Blake was shot in the back 7 times, he's paralyzed now. We're not sure if the paralyzation is permanent. LeBron and Doc Rivers, they commented on it. I'm going to let you guys hear what they have to say.
If you're sitting here telling me that there was no way to subdue that gentleman, or detain him, or to just before the firing of guns, then you sitting here, you lying to not only me, you lying to every African American, every Black person in the community, because we see it over and over and over. There was multiple, if you watch the video, there was multiple moments where if they wanted to, they could have tackled him, they could have grabbed him. You know, they could have done that. And why does it always have to get to a point where we see the guns firing? I know people get tired of hearing me say it, but we are scared as Black people in America. Black men, Black women, Black kids, we are terrified. Because you don't know. You have no idea. You have no idea how that cop that day left the house. You don't know if he woke up on the good side of the bed. You don't know if he woke up on the wrong side of the bed. You don't know if he had an argument at home with a significant other. You know, if one of his kids said something crazy to him and he left the house steaming. Or maybe he just left the house saying that today is going to be the end for one of these Black people. That's what it feels like. Like we want change. As a community, we really want change. And it doesn't not only just end in November, but it starts there. It starts there. And, but we got to continue to still keep our foot on the pedal then. Even if we get what we want, we still need more. What are we getting? Because right now of what's going on is just not okay.
So the one thing I want you guys to hear in this is Lebron mentioned scared, you know, and when we get into Doc Rivers' speech, he'll also mention the word fear. And that is the biggest thing right now. I think we're angry, yes, or at least I'm angry, but there's this fear right now. And my husband and I have talked about, you know, owning a gun, because like you just never know what it is in this world. I've never been the one to like, my dad was a police officer, you guys know that, but like he's told me that guns escalate situations and they're normally turned against their owners, especially if you're not training them. So I was like, that'll never be me. But these situations, you don't want to be a hashtag. No, yes, you don't want to kill anyone, but you also don't want to be a hashtag and you don't want to be paralyzed. So there's this fear, but Doc Rivers talks about it, there's this fear. But we also talked about that later on, there were protests in Kenosha, I believe that's how you pronounce it, where Jacob was shot. And there was a white man militia walking around with a semi-automatic rifle that was about 3/4 his size, dangling to his feet. But there was no fear of him. The police were there, no fear of him. But there's a fear of a Black man in a white t-shirt with his back turned to you. And that's just a bold-faced lie. There's no fear there. Like that thing that LeBron said at the end, where you don't know if he's going to leave the house. Forget about in a bad mood, because your training should be enough that you're not in a bad mood. He's going to leave the house just saying, I'm going to kill a Negro today. And honestly, when these things happen, that's what I feel. I've told you guys that numerous times. We know about the infiltration of white supremacist groups in police force. And I believe the same thing is happening here and continuing to happen. So I'll let you guys also listen to Doc Rivers and what he had to say about that.
Spewing this fear, right? Like, all you hear is Donald Trump and all of them talking about fear. We're the ones getting killed. We're the ones getting shot. We're the ones that we're denied to live in certain communities. We've been hung, we've been shot, and all you do is keep hearing about fear. It's amazing to me why we keep loving this country and this country does not love us back. And it's really so sad. Like, I should just be a coach. And it's so often reminded of my color. You know, It's just really sad. We got to do better. But we got to demand better. Like we got, it's funny. We protest and they send riot guards, right? They send people in riot outfits. They go to Michigan with guns and they're spitting on cops and nothing happens. The training has to change in the police force. The unions have to be taken down in the police force. My dad was a cop. I believe in good cops. We're not trying to defund the police and take all their money away. We're trying to get them to protect us, just like they protect everybody else. I didn't want to talk about it before the game because it's so hard. Like, to just keep watching it. That video, if you watch that video, you don't need to be black to be outraged. You need to be American and outraged. And how dare the Republicans talk about fear? We're the ones that need to be scared. We're the ones having to talk to every black child. What white father has to give his son a talk about being careful if you get pulled over? It's just ridiculous. And it just keeps going. There's no charges. Breonna Taylor, no charges, nothing. All we're asking is you live up to the Constitution. That's all we're asking for everybody, for everyone. Thank you.
Like, yes,
Not
Doc.
right there. Yeah, I want to clap.
Yeah, like Doc, he coaches by nature are orators, but he said that with tears in his eyes. And to see a man that powerful come to tears for this, like he said, he doesn't want to have to think about his color. He just wants to be a coach, and didn't want to talk about it before the game because he just wants to be a coach. And one thing that he said about, I wish this country loved Black folks as much as we love it. There was a theme and a quote in the 1619 project that the New York Times did. And the truth is that Black people, we believe and love this country, not having a competition, but more than this country loves itself, right? Because we uphold its ideals, and we're holding them to these truths that are supposed to be self-evident every day. We're like, hey, you said I'm equal, make me equal. Hey, you said I'm protected, make me protected. And at the same time, while we're fighting for our civil rights, it's also like, well, these poor people over here and these women over here, and everyone benefits for this fight. And it's like, we've made this country be better, because other than that, it probably would have just stayed in the shithole it was, because no one would hold it accountable. And so that really stuck with me when he said it. And then, everyone, we also say, like, you love our rhythm, but you don't love our blues. Like, yeah, you want to watch us play basketball, you want to watch us tap dance, you want to watch us rap, but you're not here to listen about our blues and being shot down in the street, and that it's a real problem and that we need to fix it. So it's just another sobering day. I hope for America, it shouldn't just be for Black folk. I think Charles Barkley said the other day, why are we always asking, we ask Black people about Black stuff, but we don't ask white people about white stuff. Like, where's Brett, about Black stuff, like, where's Brett Favre talking about something, or Tom Brady talking about something? So it should be a sobering day for America once again. And I'm happy to have my TrueHoop family to talk this out, because other than that, it just becomes anger in the shoe room, and it's tough.
Do you remember you showed us the video of the, oh my gosh, I forget where she was. The woman talking about, like, the Target, like, I don't care if the Target was burned down.
Yep.
And then she's like, you're lucky that we just want equality and not revenge, right?
Yeah. And sooner or later, I feel like it's going to come to that. If you keep people oppressed for long enough, and Gerard and I talk about this all the time, it's like, burn the motherfucker down. It's just nature resetting itself. Like, no one will live with a knee on their neck or a foot on their neck for so long, no group of people, without revolting. And we've seen it in history, and it's bound to repeat itself.
Doc Rivers set the music, I think. You could set that to music. That's a hit song,
yeah.
Right?
A knee on their neck or a bullet in their spine, as it turns out in this case.
Yeah.
We got euphemisms for days. They keep giving it to us, and the sad part is I'm waiting for November, and I'm like, let's. But like, is it gonna change? Right? I could see policies and hopefully pandemics going away, but this shit was here when we had a Black man in office. Maybe it wasn't as prevalent. It was here before him, and even if we got what we want in November, like LeBron said, like it may still be here, and we still have to work towards changing it.
I'll tell you what else. In the unwritten rules of public discourse in the NBA, like a lot of people in the NBA feel the way Doc Rivers feels and talk without using the word Republicans. It's very careful, right? That was a big deal that he said Republicans. It's very, very rare.
Yeah. I'm actually sometimes, while I hate the whole Republican Democrat, it's just like, I guess they are the ones talking about fear, but it kind of puts one side against each other and makes white people who are Democrats believe like, well, I'm not part of the problem. Hey, you probably are.
Yeah,
like this isn't a red-blue problem. This is an American problem. Yeah. But yes, they do skirt around that. And then one thing I wanted to add about the Black coaches thing, and this is where you come in, Henry.
Okay, I'm here.
Yes, all the arenas that don't allow us to make it a voting center. I look to the owners, we make a list of them, and it's like, pew, 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 we know where you stand.
Yeah. Okay, I'm on it.
Yeah.
I got that for you.
Exactly.
Dina, thank you very much.
No problem. I'll stick around. I love to hear what Dina has to say.
Yeah, now it's the fun coronavirus part.
Following this up? No,
Right.
It should be the whole show.
Yeah. Oh, it has been.
No, okay, Dina, welcome. Since you were last here, you won an award. We need our victories. Here we go. I can't read that, it's so small. American Society of Journalists and Authors congratulates Dana Smith. Crisis Coverage Award, Science. Nice going.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have so much to talk about. I want to pick your brain about 50 different things, but one of them is there was a study I saw last week that like sports events like NBA and NHL games are kind of have the potential to be super spreader events. And according to this one analysis of the math, could have led to 50 plus COVID deaths per game before the season shut down. What do you make of that research?
I mean, it's not surprising. It's also not surprising given how we know how the virus spread. I mean, you also shared one that said, influenza mortality plus COVID mortality. I mean, you put a whole bunch of people together in a room. If anyone is sick, of course it's going to spread. And whether it's through droplets, if someone's sneezing and coughing, whether it's through fomites and it's touching surfaces, whether it's through the public bathrooms and the, fecal plumes in the air, whether it's through airborne spread, if the virus is in aerosol molecules, like you put tens of thousands of people together in a room, especially one that's indoors. Like I thought it was really interesting that it was NBA and NHL, which granted are the, seasons that are going on, but in January we saw a little bit of NFL. So anyway, it's indoors, you have tens of thousands of people. Of course you're going to have super spreader events. Like there was also just I think just this week they found out that the Boston healthcare conference, ironically, led to 20,000 cases in Boston. I mean, it's natural. It's going to happen if you put a ton of people together in a room. It happened with flu before COVID, and I'm not surprised at all, to be honest. I'm amazed that they were able to pinpoint it that specifically to the increased number of deaths. I also wonder if there's a little bit of, only big cities have major professional sports teams. You're more likely to see spread in those large cities just because they're more crowded. There's more international travel. There's a lot of kind of additional factors in the correlation between those two events. But yeah, it also doesn't surprise me that, any type of major public indoor event would lead to a ton of spread.
I had a weird experience where I saw that study, I'm going to make it up, let's say last Wednesday, and then maybe last Friday, Adam Silver says, we don't want to make a plan for next year until we can have a plan with fans back in the stands. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. As science, I guess that's kind of a math research, really. Like, is it convincing enough that you just put the brakes on having fans in the stands anytime soon? Like, is that just out of the question for now? And you said fecal plume.
I did. There's a lot of different ways this virus is spread, as are other viruses. So yeah, I did. You know, it's science. It's science, Henry. Come on. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge epidemiological problem, and you know, I cannot imagine there being an event where you have fans inside an area, inside a stadium, before we have a vaccine. Like, I just do not see a way that this is possible. I think the NBA has had an incredible success with masks, with distancing, with people adhering to the bubble. Maybe don't mess with success. I mean, like, you know, there have been no cases, and then you compare that to the study where you have, you know, I think you 500 deaths, extra deaths, you know, because of sporting events. And, you know, we're dealing with having to get universities back. We're dealing with trying to get schools reopened. We're seeing huge problems with that already. I cannot imagine adding another huge public event that's, you know, a non-essential one anytime soon. Like, it just, yeah.
But you mentioned the vaccine, but you wrote something, and Dr. Mina, who we had on the show, talked about the saliva test, and you create a scenario. Just imagine, wake up in the morning, and before you take your shower, you do a saliva test. If indeed we had that and not yet a vaccine, could you then envision, you know, potentially not necessarily 20,000 people in, but because I don't know how you police it, but at least is there a thought that that's how we can get back to a little more about, you know, having fans in games, that kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like Dr. Mina's saliva test idea is phenomenal. Like, I wish that would happen. I hope it can happen. From what he says, you know, it sounds like we have the technology for it to happen pretty rapidly. It would just be the rollout. And of course, there'd be huge logistical challenges of people, you know, actually getting the test. Who's going to pay for it? Is the government going to send them out? How do you know if someone has tested themselves every day?
Right.
But, you know, theoretically, yeah, if you can do an easy saliva test that is then essentially a pregnancy test where you can see the result immediately on a strip of paper, you don't have to send it to a lab. You know, there is a saliva test approved now, but you still have to do the outsourcing to a lab. Like, there's still a lot of hurdles in the way. But if you can do that at-home test in the morning, you get a negative result, then yeah, I could feasibly see that if everyone is doing that, you can go back to school, you can go back to the office. I think in terms of priorities, having fans in a stadium is still pretty low on the list compared to schools opening, offices reopening.
Unless you're a creepy billionaire who owns an NBA team, Dana.
I mean, I get that maybe these things are, you know, not are a little political or a little slanted.
Dana,
yeah.
I need my chicken fingers and hot dogs that I get at the stadium. Like, what are you talking about?
I mean, I feel you. Go to McDonald's. I don't know. Go to the Costco. Get the Costco hot dog. You know, like, there's other options. Yeah, I think there's a lot of amazing research happening. There's also these kind of monoclonal antibodies that people are talking about. There are a lot of options that can kind of be stopgaps until we get to a vaccine and we get herd immunity. I think the daily testing would be an amazing one. But, you know, I would not go to a professional sports game or a bar, for that matter, until we had a vaccine. So
how long are we talking?
I mean, it's $1 million question. I think it is reasonable, whether it's politically motivated or not, that the trials will end by the end of this year, and we'll know how the phase 3 trials do by the end of this year. If everything goes according to plan, if it's best case scenario, if it really does work, even if it's only 50% effective, I can see them rolling it out through 2021. I think, again, logistically, it's going to be a pretty big ask, and I don't know how they're going to prioritize it. I know they're investing a lot of money into developing the vaccines, you know, and taking a multi-pronged approach where they're putting millions and millions of dollars toward developing lots of different types to see who wins first. Long story short, I think it would take at least 6 months to roll this out, where it was, and that's me totally pulling that out of the air. I don't.
We appreciate that. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very clear what I'm making up and what it's actually based in fact right now. My guess is around 6 to 9 months to roll it out. So I can see next fall. I can see fall 2021. Maybe you're back for NFL games.
Just a year late for Adam Silver.
Yeah, just a year. Yeah, that would be.
Dana,
2021, 2022 is looking real good.
Yeah.
I have a question about a vaccine. So at least among people I talk to, like Black folk, were very fearful of doctors, medication, i.e. the Tuskegee experiment, i.e. doctors not listening to us. So a lot of people are like, I'm not taking that vaccine. No, I'm gonna wait. Kind of like the first version of an Apple iPhone software. Should we do that? Or like, how are we gonna convince people not to do that?
It's a great question. And there's so many good historical and current reasons for Black people to distrust the medical community. Like, it sucks. I hate saying that. It's 100% true. And people, reluctance to the coronavirus vaccine is not just a Black issue. Like, there's obviously a lot more historical precedent for a reason for distrust, but you see the surveys, and I think it's like hovering around 50% of people who would trust or not. And that's obviously a pretty reasonable thing to say right now. Like, we don't have it. We don't have the data on how effective it is. We don't have the data on how safe it is. It's understandable that people would be hesitant right now. Like, that's a very normal thing to feel about a new medication, a new vaccine, something they're putting into your body. That being said, despite some snafus recently, I do trust the medical and science community. I do trust the FDA. I trust Fauci. I trust, the NIH, that they're not going to roll out something that is not safe. I think the bigger question will be how effective it is, but I do not think that safety will be a concern, because if it is, that is a debacle on like monumental scale if the vaccine is actually unsafe for people. I just cannot imagine a world where anybody thinks that's a good idea to roll that out. So I do think that it will be safe when it comes out. The question will be how effective it is. That all being said, there's a lot of people who are smarter than me who are doing a lot of very targeted research of getting into the communities. Any community where people are hesitant, like, we have to answer questions. We have to acknowledge and validate that feeling. And, there's talk about getting church leaders, about going to barbershops, about having a really community-based communication campaign to try and answer people's questions and alleviate fears about it. Because why would you believe me? Why would you believe anybody, at the top? Like, you really have to hear it from people that you trust on a personal level. And I think that is the next challenge, and one that's almost as great as getting the vaccine itself, is making sure that people really do trust it. And, that starts with really great research at the top. That starts with hopefully not a corrupt FDA and, presidential administration. And then it goes down to the individual provider and community levels. And people are working on that. So hopefully by the time we have a vaccine and we do believe it's safe and effective, then people can trust that information and feel good about getting it.
Danny, you just something really, well, you said important things, but when you mentioned you trust Dr. Fauci, and then you mentioned the FDA rushing it, we know about the snafu the head of the FDA had the other day regarding the therapy and how many people it really does help. But so Dana, you knowing much more about this than all of us on this call, trust Dr. Fauci. He's given you no reason not to trust him to now. Do you feel that way? So if he supported the vaccine, that would go a long way, because you're not going to look at the science of the vaccine. Men like him or women like him who say you can trust this, that would help you trust that it wasn't rushed, because we know politically as of now everything's being pushed so with haste.
Right. I'm going to look at the science also, but like I trust Fauci is not he's been a public health figure for the last 30 years. He went through the HIV crisis. Like, I trust that Fauci is appropriately scientifically skeptical of any results that come out. And we've already seen that. We saw that last week with the convalescent serum. So the story of convalescent serum is that, if you have recovered from coronavirus, then you have the antibodies to the virus. And hopefully if you just give the plasma that contains those antibodies to people who are sick, it will help them mount the same immune response and they'll recover faster. And if they're a severe case, they won't die. So this has been used for hundreds of years. We used it against Ebola. Like, it's again, a known safe procedure. The question is, how effective is this for coronavirus? And so the Mayo Clinic has had a huge sort of trial where they were testing this on people and giving patients the plasma, except they never had a control arm. So they came out with results like a week or so ago saying, yeah, it's effective. It helps people not die. This is great. The key is it's about 5% effective. It depends on when you give it. It depends on how many antibodies the serum has. And again, they didn't have the control arm, which is what you really look for in kind of the gold standard clinical trial. So it's encouraging results. We know that this is safe. the FDA was going to roll it out under the emergency use access, and then Fauci and others said, wait a second, this is premature. We don't actually know how effective this is. This could hinder other clinical trials if we roll it out too soon. Let's put the brakes on this. This is, again, why I trust Fauci, that like, if something isn't adding up, if it doesn't pass the sniff test, then he's not going to endorse it. This then got a political swing, and it was approved, I believe, yesterday or 2 days ago anyway. And there was a whole snafu with the 35% saying it would, save 35 people out of 100. That's not true. That's a made-up number that was incredibly cherry-picked and selective. Yeah.
Made-up number is a great phrase you want to hear. Like, just a number. Look at that.
Surprise! They're making up stuff.
Yeah. So that's the whole backstory. But yeah, I would say even with that little narrow case study, I trust people like Fauci to have a much more critical view of the data and to not endorse things, not endorse treatments or vaccines for a political motive.
All in all, how would you review the NBA's bubble? Like, what do we learn from this? Does it apply to anything else in the world?
I give it an A. I was skeptical. Like I was very skeptical, and I give it an A. I mean, they have been, they've had no positive cases. Great meme. Right there.
What is going on?
Yeah, I mean, it worked. They're doing what we would want to do in the rest of the world. There's a mask mandate. There's people being, careful about distancing and their interactions with people. They're not going to bars. Like, players are adhering to the guidelines, and they're testing every single day. I mean, in a perfect world, this is what we would all have available to us. We would have those daily tests. There would be a mask mandate, and people would feel a personal responsibility to not get infected and not infect others. So, I think it's a huge success. I just wish that could be replicated on a wider scale, particularly at elementary schools, high schools, universities, anywhere.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
Dana, how important do you think it is for the everyday person to get tested, and how often? Like, I'll admit I've been thinking about, I'm gonna go down there, and get tested. I'm like, which one do I get? Or I don't need it. I'm not sick. I've been in my shoe room. How important do you think it is for the everyday person to just, because I get a lot of text messages from the New York City government, like, go get tested. How important is it for us to actually do that?
Whether you have a shoe room or not, like either kind of person. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, in a perfect world, we're testing all the time. This is how places like South Korea and Hong Kong have gotten out of their, huge outbreaks, is that they have testing contact. Like, that is best case scenario. Anyone gets a test whenever you want. Unfortunately, there have been a lot of bottlenecks, both, first from the testing supply aspect, and now from the, reagents that would then evaluate the test. So there are these long turnaround times. And that's where it gets a little bit stickier. It's like, if we had enough tests for everybody, get tested every day. Why not? Like, you feel better about it. But the reality is, just like the N95 mask, we do still have a limited resource. And so you do want to allocate the tests and get that response time really short for the people who actually need it. For people who are healthcare workers, who, if you're really concerned that you've had an exposure, if you work at a nursing home, like people who are at much higher risk and have a known potential exposure. So right now, the recommendation, well, it was until this week, if you have had, contact with someone who's become infected, then you should go get tested. And you should also, if you really think you've had contact with them, you should quarantine until you get your negative result back. In another political maneuver, the CDC has now done away with the testing advice if you've had potential contact with someone, and just now recommends quarantine for 14 days. I don't know if that is a concern because of, again, like the testing shortages and the long turnaround times, or if this is somehow connected to Trump's idea that if you test less, you have fewer cases, which is just patently false. So I think, to get back to your question on like a personal level, it depends on kind of what the testing capacity is in your area and what the spread is in your area. So where are you based? Where are you?
New York, New Jersey. So
okay. So you guys are actually doing really well. Like the positive result is like less than 1%. It's amazing. And it sounds like if you're getting these texts from your public health, local public health officials, that they have tests available and they want people to get tested, that if you go get tested, you're essentially not taking away a test from somebody else. So then you could probably be in the clear if you want to get tested before you go see your parents or grandparents or something like that. Like, I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to do. But again, it's a very specific to like where you are and what the testing capacity is in that area. If you're just getting tested for peace of mind, but you're going to go back to the shoe room, then like maybe skip the test.
The room is very safe, Adina.
I don't know if that answers your question. It's like, it's messy. It's like everything. Yeah.
Dana, my wife and I gave blood on Monday, and they said that they are now testing the American Red Cross is testing like every blood donation for antibodies. But do we care about those results? Isn't that test like very misleading at times?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I think that the Red Cross's testing for antibodies is so interesting. For one thing, it'll provide an incredible wealth of data. So like from a scientific perspective, it is an awesome, data point that they're collecting. You're right, the tests are not perfect. I'm not sure what the accuracy rate is right now. I want to say between like 70 and 90%, depending on which test you take.
That's pretty good.
It's not bad. It's not ideal, but it's not bad. But it also depends, presumably they're using like actual approved real tests, not one that you would order on Amazon from China and is, not necessarily gone through all the regulatory processes. So some of the legit antibody tests are pretty accurate. I don't want to say it's better than nothing. It's probably better than nothing. Like, if you really think that you had coronavirus, if you've had symptoms, if you've had contact with someone, then you get an antibody test and it comes back positive, like you can be pretty comfortable that that's a real result. If you've had no potential exposure and you get a positive antibody test, like take that one with a pretty larger grain of salt. In general with antibodies, like we feel pretty good that they offer protection. It does look like people who genuinely have a case of COVID-19 do develop antibodies, and those antibodies like in a lab dish are able to fight off the virus. So it's really encouraging for, immunity, for vaccines working, all that. Coincidentally, this week there was the first confirmed case of someone getting reinfected. But I think it's actually not as scary as that sounds when you place it in context of like, this is one case out of 23 million that we've had. It was also pretty unique where the guy was from Hong Kong, he traveled to Spain, and they were able to sequence the genomes of his 2 positive tests. So he got tested in March, it was positive. He got tested in August, positive. And those 2 positive tests were different strains of the virus. Like they differed in 24 different places in the virus genome. And they know that one of them, the second one, was a variation of the virus that was circulating in Europe. So very clearly he like got infected with a different strain of the virus in a different continent. And that's how he tested positive. He also surprisingly didn't have very good antibodies after his first infection. So that was kind of the key, where like most people do have really good antibodies. If you have the really good antibodies, you're not going to get infected. For some reason, this guy didn't. We don't know why, but it seems to be an anomaly. And what do you know? He didn't have antibodies. He did get reinfected, but he didn't have any symptoms. So his immune system actually still fought off the virus, and it was a mild to asymptomatic case, which is again what you would expect if your immune system remembered the virus and fought it off more effectively. So kind of a good story, and like not all, like the immunologists I talked to were like, it's not that surprising. We knew this would happen eventually.
Dr. Mina had this great line. We were like, oh, reinfection. And he was like, yeah, no, like that might be some of that, but it's like your memory. Like it actually, your immune system, I'm sure this is dumbed down for like 6th grade level for us, which I really appreciated. But he was like, you learn a song once and you don't quite get it down, but like, he's like, but I would expect that your second infection people wouldn't have quite the same severe symptoms. And this is how kids get infected with lots of colds, and then your immune system kind of learns those viruses. And he'd calm me right down. I was like, oh, the reinfection thing seems like no problem. We're just
totally. And like it played out just as he predicted. Like the memory is a great analogy. And sure enough, the guy had no symptoms, and then he had a lot of antibodies after the second round of infection. So
he did. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he didn't the first time, but the second, after the second infection, he did have a lot of antibodies. So again, it's responding how you would expect it to. The only question is whether he was contagious with the second infection, which is what we don't know. And that is a little bit more concerning because then it could be, the asymptomatic spread, and he could still infect people with the virus, even if he wasn't symptomatic. So that question remains to be answered. But again, it's not that surprising. And again, it's one case in 23 million. I'm sure there are others, but it's not something that we should all freak out over and say, a vaccine isn't going to work or antibody tests are useless. So.
I have a couple friends who had symptoms, tested positive, went through the hell of being, sick with coronavirus, and are now in the aftermath and have been told by the doctors they're basically have 3 months of not having to really worry about getting infected, and are taking flights and going to have dinner and doing talk me through this. Are they?
I mean, from the Hong Kong case, I maybe wouldn't travel to a different continent because there can be a different strain of the virus circulating. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of like the immunity passport debate that people had very on, where if you do have antibodies, if you really were infected and you have antibodies to the virus, yeah, you kind of do get a free pass to society. Okay. I wouldn't maybe go around people who are high risk just in case that you could have an asymptomatic second case and infect them. But even from the Hong Kong case, it seems like you're not going to get sick again. You're not going to have symptoms again. There is a pandemic circulating. It's very new. There could be some surprising things we don't know yet, but I would say it's probably you're safer than most people are to go eat inside a restaurant, et cetera, et cetera. Don't go to a nursing home. Don't go to the hospital ward and try and get it or try and infect other people. But yeah, you could probably go to a restaurant if you have antibodies. Eventually that will be the goal with the vaccine. We'll all have antibodies to it. We'll have herd immunity, and we can slowly get back to things as normal.
It's the new cool. This is the new cool. If you're in your 3 months, you're
I'm jealous,
So Dana, I don't even say I'm going to ask you something. I'm going to present some thoughts, and I'd love for you to opine. I don't expect you to know everything that I'm going to say with an answer. So just trust me on this. These are things that I'm thinking about all the time.
This sounds like an oral exam. This sounds like you're about to test me on something right now.
I just want to hear your brilliant opinion and see if it matches at all with my very, very amateur thoughts.
Bring it on.
We know that people who have some immune deficiencies and or just very old or whatever, we understand the risks to some degree there. And we've heard a lot about the phrase viral load for a long time now. How important do you think that is if we made everyone equally immune to a point? Is that still the more determining factor as to why someone would be symptomatic and others may not? Is that still a big deal?
Seems like a chance to use fecal plume. Just throwing that out there.
I thought the same thing too. But I'm sick. I'm done.
I really want to fit this into the answer now, but I don't know if I can responsibly. So viral load is a huge question. It's one reason that we think that masks work because, we all know that masks, contain your, airborne spread and droplets and everything from breathing out, but it actually does protect to some extent the amount that come in. And so if there are viruses, outside the mask you're breathing in, fewer of them get inside into your airways. And so we do know that there is a viral load. I don't want to say symptom correlation, but if you don't have enough viral load, you're not going to get sick. And so you only have a little bit of contact with them. If you're protected by a mask, you're much less likely to get infected. Because if there are a few virus particles, in your body, your immune system can actually defeat them. It can fend it off. And maybe then you have 2 antibodies versus 2,000 antibodies. But you kind of effectively fought off the infection and it was just teeny tiny. I don't know how that would relate to testing or anything like that, but that is theoretically the idea that yes, the lower your viral load, the more effective your immune response will be and the less likely you will be to actually get sick.
So walking by someone on a sidewalk path, for example, initially back in March when I was walking, I gave people a wide berth. It really isn't so important now, is it? Even if we're not wearing masks in Florida, we're not crowded where I live. So I don't wear a mask when I'm doing my regular walk. If I'm just going by them, I still go around them because they're not talking to you on a show. But are they really at risk if I just walk by them for a moment?
Probably not. It's a better safe than sorry situation where, you know, I agree with you. Like I'm not wearing a mask when I'm walking my dog because I'm not coming into contact with people.
Right.
But if I'm on a crowded trail that's like, you know, a 6-foot wide trail and I'm passing a lot of people, I will mask up when I pass them just to be, you know, just out of abundance of caution. But the other key part is you're outside. And so this is the kind of like airborne debate where as soon as it's in the air, it gets dispersed from the wind, and you know the sun can have a little bit of an effect. Like it spreads out a lot more. So if you then pass the person at the exact time, even if they breathe out as you breathe in, there's some amount of kind of like cross breeze that will disperse the airways, and you will inhale less of the virus than if you were sitting face to face with them inside an enclosed room and the air was just kind of staying trapped between you two. So that's a huge reason why outside is safer than inside, is because it disperses the virus. And so even if you did breathe a little bit in, it would be a much lower concentration. You would have much less viral load than if you were inside in like a, you know, stale air room.
Have you done outdoor dining?
I have not, because I'm in a bubble with my parents who are in their 70s and my niece who is less than a year old. If it was just me and my fiance were healthy, we're in our 30s, I would, depending on what like the positivity rate was and how far away we were from people and how like, maybe I would dine outside if it was just us. With the added, you know, bubble and people who I care about, like it's just not worth the risk for me. We'll just get carry out. So it's kind of a personal.
I can't tell how to feel.
And it's got to be below 90 degrees.
Yeah, and it's very important. I'm now in North Carolina. It's like 90% humidity and 90 degrees all the time. So that, you know, lowers the peel.
The New York Times has a story today about in London, they're giving dining outside pretty close together. It's in the city, right? We've seen these pictures from like, there was a pretty good social media video of like Soho, New York, had like live jazz and people sitting outside, and I can't decide if inside I'm like, oh my God, this is so scary, or like, yay, we're coming back. Like I don't know. How do you take those pictures?
You know, it's kind of like the beach pictures early on. Like there was like so much, you know, close all the beaches down. The beaches are like spreading in, you know, the virus in Florida and Southern California. And it's actually like, no, the beach is probably the safest places we could be. Yeah. But if you're sharing a table with a stranger and you are, you know, within 6 feet of them, then that is going to up your risk substantially. So like, yeah, if you're dining outside, if it's like a nice evening and there's like a little bit of a breeze and you're, you know, at very far apart separate tables and the waiters are wearing masks and, you know, maybe you're wearing a mask on the way to and the way there. And, you know, when you're not actually eating, it probably is safe. Like that probably is fine. And I obviously don't want to see all of our restaurants go under. But I think when you start crowding people in, then the safety level goes down a lot, even if it's outside. So again, just be smart about it. You know, like the virus is still there. It hasn't gone away just because we want it to, or just because it's August, or just because, you know.
Is there a number? I mean, outside of getting a vaccine, when is the pandemic over? Is there a number or a level of infections?
Good question.
Yeah, it's so basically the goal is getting herd immunity, and it's an ongoing debate about like what percentage of the population needs to have protection, whether it's through a previous infection or whether it's through the vaccine until we get herd immunity. But the key is the R0, which is the R0 that you've seen a lot of. And it's, if I get infected, how many people am I likely to infect? And so for a long time, it's hovered around like 2 or 3. And the goal is to get it below 1, because that means that if I get infected, I am infecting 0 to 1 people. So like essentially it could stop with me. Like if I get infected, I will not then go on to pass the virus on to somebody else. And if you then expand that to the entire population, it starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller rather than bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's the key number to look for, is like, what is the R0? What is essentially, how is the virus replicating and spreading among people?
Are you worried, Dana? Are people you're talking to worried about Labor Day coming up and what it might mean?
Oh God, I wasn't until you just said that.
Thank you, David.
Why? Yeah, I mean, probably, you know, like, it's like Memorial Day was a shit show. July 4th was a shit show. Like, yeah, you're probably right that Labor Day will probably be the same, whether it's increasing, you know, more cases, whether it's then leading to like the testing backlog that we saw after July 4th. Yeah, maybe don't go to a Labor Day party. Sorry.
What do people even do on Labor Day? Is that is there a tradition? I don't even know. Like
a barbecue, you're gonna
barbecue?
you're gonna just
This year they're going to catch COVID 1 in 5 probably. That's
At
what
least
they're
they
gonna
don't
be
all
doing
ride their motorcycles to one little town in South Dakota and go to the same strip club. That's a plus.
Dana,
I had a strip club story, but I'm not gonna tell it.
is there, besides Dr. Fauci, is there another doctor or really health professional, scientist, whatever, that we should know about that maybe we wouldn't? I think we're all following it pretty closely, but is there someone else that you think we should be following?
I mean, there's so many good ones on Twitter right now. Like we're going to come out with it soon. There's like the 50 list of like experts that you should be following on Twitter.
Okay.
You know, it's epidemiologists, it's virologists, it's infectious disease experts. There's so many smart and passionate and dedicated people who are working on this. You know, you guys had on Michael Mina, he's a great one. Carl Bergstrom at the University of Washington is phenomenal. He just cuts through the crap really, really well. He has a very high standard for how, you know, what the quality of studies should be. So he's a great follow. Andy Slavit is another one. You know, he's gone viral with a lot of his threads. He was key in setting up the Affordable Care Act under Obama. He just knows a lot of the ins and outs of the healthcare system. He talks to all the big people, and he kind of, I think almost every day, will kind of condense everything into one pretty good thread about whatever the FDA or the CDC, you know, whoever is doing. So he's definitely another good one. There are a bunch of really badass women epidemiologists also who are just a really no-nonsense take on Twitter. Eleanor Murray, who's an epidemiologist at Boston University, is a good one. Natalie Dean in Florida is phenomenal.
We are very pro badass women, just to be clear here on.
I figured that, yeah, you guys are good. Yeah, those are the ones that off the top of my head were.
What was Natalie's last name?
Dean, D-E-A-N. And she's actually at University of Florida, I believe. So, you know.
Hey, what do you know?
Hey. Dave's Florida pride. I've been following nurses too. There's some pretty hot nurse Twitter where like you get accounts of what's happening in hospitals, which feels really important. It feels
I do
like
that too.
Yeah.
Whatever anybody says, like this is what's really happening, right?
Yeah, you know, your hot nurse. I thought you were going in a different direction with that part of the phrase, but you know, you really saved that one.
As it came out, I was like, oh, what a nightmare.
I follow some very hot nurses that I grew up with. They're girls I've known since elementary and middle school. And before they go in for like a 12-hour session, they take a picture of their entire outfit and like, wish me luck, pray for me, whatever. Like, it's real. They're my age. They're 55.
They're heroes. I mean, yeah, nurses are
unbelievable.
Saving us all. You know, they're
right.
We
need to bring in Gerard. I'm noticing the time. Gerard is traditionally asked the last question, and it always makes more sense than what we've been talking about before Gerard's here. And he may want to weigh in on hot nurses. I don't know. I'm sorry that
I am staying away from hot nurses. Nope, not having that conversation. Adena, thanks again for coming back and joining us. I'm wondering, we have all this information about data, and you cite a lot of different data from different states and what they're doing. Like, how are we to believe this data, given what we know about Trump and his like neutering of the CDC, and like how do I know this is real? And I'm not saying that I don't trust it. It's just more like, what are the states reporting to whom? Is everybody doing the same thing? Like, what's happening? And no, I'm not in Paris, folks. Yeah, sorry, had to come back to the city. You know how it is.
Welcome home.
Thank you.
Oh God, you just asked like the most depressing, real world, like, impossible to answer question. It's a great question. I mean, if you really want to get nerdy with this answer, oh gosh, what's her name? She just wrote in Nature about this exact question. Sorry, also my Slack is going crazy. Sorry, guys. And I want to pull up this article because it's asking exactly this question. Basically, it's a great question. I think most of the states' local public health authorities are doing a pretty good job of reporting the information, and the hospitals and the public health authorities, like hospitals report to the local public health authorities, And then they were giving a lot of the data to the CDC, which is how they were updating their numbers. They were also, giving to places like the Johns Hopkins coronavirus tracker, which is a phenomenal resource that everyone should check out if you're curious. So there is reporting happening. For a fun 2 weeks, the CDC was no longer receiving those reports and it was going straight to HHS. And then they admitted that they didn't know what they were doing. So they've now given it back to the CDC, which is a good thing. Another fun, addition to this pandemic. Places like, again, South Korea and Hong Kong have in Singapore have amazing data and contact tracing they're doing so much with, and we do not have that. I want to say that you should just trust it because I think the vast majority of people are trying to do their jobs and are doing it really well, despite a really challenging situation. But it's a valid question, and I don't have a much better answer for you than that. But I will this awesome Nature paper, which gets at this exact question. If you give me 2 seconds, I know.
Awesome. Are we believing any of the data out of Florida and Texas and Arizona?
I'm gonna punt on that one. I don't have enough on the ground sourcing. David, maybe you can answer that one about Florida. I don't know, resident Florida man.
I'm happy to talk NBA data. I'll talk NBA data. I won't do anything else.
Yeah. Okay.
It's sad though, because I never found myself disbelieving scientific data before this presidency. And
that's why. It's just because of him. It's not because I don't believe in science. It's this dude who I'm
exactly.
Are you manipulating data? What's happening right now?
Right. To be clear, it's not the scientists doing this. I do want to be clear. The scientists are working on this. I do trust them. I think they're doing phenomenal jobs. It's a political pressure that should not ever be in a pandemic. That is, Here, I'm sharing this article right now about from
awesome.
Jackson that just came up yesterday.
Thank you.
How perfect that Gerard has a recently published answer to Gerard's exact question.
Look at that. Sometimes you win.
Look at that. Sometimes you win. Amy Maxman. Dana, thank you so much. David, Gerard, Adina, Judy, awesome stuff. Really appreciate it.
Okay,